Thanks, Susan. And the recording will be posted later on the Literacy Action Network website. So welcome. This is the web chat with MN ABE, and we're glad to have you with us. So first of all, I'm just going to take a minute to step through the agenda and the plan that we have for our meeting today. We'll start with, we are starting with a welcome. We'll do introductions in just a second. We have an update on the Contact Hour Working Group. We have some information about grants and funding, accountability, transitions, high Cs or high school equivalency assessments, upcoming PD or professional development, and then we'll have some time for questions. And we are hoping to have a chunk of time at the end of our session today for you all to spend a little time in breakouts, really kind of sharing ideas and learning from each other about what your thoughts and plans are for this fall. So that is the plan. All right. This is our adult education team, and I am trying to turn on my camera. Whoops, that's not how you do it. So I am Jody. I am the program quality specialist on the team, and I am getting us started today because Brad, who is our state director, has a little bit of a plumbing emergency at his house that he is dealing with. So possibly he will be joining us at some point today, but if not, that's okay. We still have all the same information to give to you. And then I'm going to pass it on to my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Danko, and I'm the transition specialist at the Department of Education.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Astrid Leiden, and I am the professional development specialist on the team. Good to see you all here today.
Great, thanks everyone. Other members of our team are Alice, who is our GED records and admin support staff member. And then we also work closely with Lena, who works in the grants department at MDE and helps us with all things grants and financial. And we are really excited to be bringing on a couple of new people onto the team over the course of the next year or so. So we will hopefully have some announcements about that in the upcoming months. All right, we wanted to give you quick updates or reminders about things that happened this year at the legislature that were relevant to ABE. In the final state budget that was passed very close to the July 1st deadline, it essentially funded our ABE, our statewide ABE system at the same level as last fiscal year. So we have approximately the same level of funding for fiscal year 22 as we did for fiscal year 21. So it's a small bump, but not particularly noticeable. The other change for adult education that came out of this legislative session is a change to the high school equivalency subsidy. So last year, that subsidy offered to pay for the full price of a student taking the full battery. Unfortunately, that was reduced this year to just a $10 per test subsidy. So that reduces the amount available to each individual test taker, but hopefully still helps a little. And the total amount available for that subsidy was also reduced. So the total pot that is available is $125,000. So some of you will remember in previous years, we have run into the issue of that pot being used up before the end of the year. Remains to be seen whether or not that might happen this year because there's lower testing amounts. So we're not sure. There was a proposal on the table that was championed by Literacy Action Network to change our ABE funding formula a little bit to link growth in the funding to growth in K-12 funding, which we think would be a very positive change for our system. However, that did not pass this time, but definitely might be something that there would be some effort to pass again in the future. And then just an update about the contact hour working group. We know that there are lots of questions and concerns about this year's hours and what they mean for next year's funding. So that is why our MDE team, together with Literacy Action Network, has convened a group of folks from across the state, from different kinds of ABE programs, to discuss this issue. And the purpose of that group is to make a recommendation specifically about what contact hour reporting period should we use for the upcoming fiscal year, 22-23. And that they will make that recommendation to LAN and to MDE. And of course, that recommendation has to adhere to state statute. We can't do anything we want. We have to do or have an approach that fits within what is currently allowable in state law. So that group has met several times. And the last meeting in June was really outlining what are the options on the table and some initial kind of straw polling and voting. And upcoming, actually tomorrow, is the final meeting of that group where there will be a vote on the final recommendation. And then hopefully, if things go as planned, then we will be able to share what that recommendation is at Summer Institute. So please be watching for that. All right, next I'm going to go through some information about our ABE grants and our funding for the upcoming year. So somewhat later than we had hoped, but finally, our initial ABE State Aid calculation has been posted on the MDE website. So for those of you who are consortium managers who work in the fiscal agent entity of your consortium, it is very important that you go in and check and make sure that all of the data used in that calculation is correct. There was an email that came from me on July 26th with more specific information about that. So just a reminder to those folks. I know that doesn't apply to all of you on the call, but it does apply to some of you. I wanted to give some sort of notes and information about our state aid this year and about kind of the complexity of the formula this year. First of all, just note or remember that the contact hours that were used in the calculation this year for this fiscal year's funding, we reused again what we've been calling the table A1 hours. So those are the March 2019 to March 2020 hours. So those pre-COVID hours back in like when the world was a different place. So we used those hours again, the same hours that we used a year ago. And the total amount of aid for the statewide system increased very slightly. So the fact that we were using the same number of hours on a slightly larger pot of funding resulted in a higher contact hour rate. So last year's rate was $7.74 per hour, I believe, or 75 maybe. This year's rate is $7.84. Now, the interesting thing about that, though, is because the contact hour rate went up, that resulted in even more consortia than last year, which there were a fair amount last year, but now more than half of our consortia ended up hitting the contact hour revenue growth cap because the value of each hour is now more. And also just a note about that is that we kept the growth cap amount exactly the same as last year for a couple of reasons. One, because we were using exactly the same number of hours, and two, because obviously there was no growth. There was the opposite of growth, right? So, so we kept those growth caps the same so that the calculation would basically distribute out the funding exactly the same way or almost exactly the same way as it did last year. So just want to remind you about this, the process and what happens at this point with those state ABE award amounts. So as I mentioned a couple slides ago, we need the fiscal agent representative or the consortium manager to go in and verify the data, make sure that it all looks correct. If you do see anything, and boy, it seems like almost every year somebody sees something, but if you do see anything, the sooner the better, if you could let me know about that. If there are any errors that we realize, oops, that needs to be corrected, then we may have to run a new calculation. And that has happened many years. However, almost always it has very minimal effect on everybody. But please do let me know if there is any error in any of the data. So that could be its contact hours, but it also could be things like your member districts and the population of the member districts and basically all the numbers that you see in that MDE report. So once we have that verification that everything is correct, once we have run a new calculation, if we need to do that, then we will go through the process of creating award letters, and those award letters will have the final amounts of state and federal aid. And those will go out at some point in August. We are a little behind in the process, but honestly, primarily we're behind because the state legislature didn't pass a budget until June 30th. So then I just want to speak for a minute about the additional funding that we have available this year. So it is really exciting that we got this additional one-time bump in funding through, this is some federal funding that the governor had some discretion to sort of distribute out. And so we got a chunk of that for adult education, which is excellent. So I know most consortia have submitted an application. We got 37 applications. And all of those applications have been accepted and are in the approval process. We know there are a couple of consortia out there that needed an extension because of being out of the office. So we're still waiting on those too. But the process of creating OGANs or official award notifications, that is currently happening. That is being led by Lena, our colleague in the grants department. I don't have an exact date for you of when you will get that. However, you should know that these funds can be used for expenses starting July 1. So regardless of when you actually get that OGAN in your hand, you can be starting the projects that you planned and thinking about and spending these funds to be reimbursed later. And sorry, I just realized I skipped one bullet. Just an FYI that as you recall, when you submitted that application, you had to either accept the full amount of the potential award or decline it or say if you wanted less. And we did have one applicant that said they did not want the full amount, but wanted a smaller amount. So the result of that is that we did reduce the amount for that one grantee, and that means everybody else will get a slightly higher amount than what was originally estimated. Not too much, but maybe an extra Chromebook or two, something like that. All right, also, I know I've been fielding questions from a number of you about carryover, because this is the time of year when if you had any of your state ABE funding from fiscal year 21 that was not spent as of July 1, remember there is a way for you to still spend up those funds. So up to 20% of your state funds can be spent between July 1 and September 30th. So we are now in that window. So I encourage you to make sure and take advantage of this option if you can. It seems every year we have underspending. Every year there's some funds left on the table, so please spend them up if you can. Might be an extra challenge this year when you already have extra money, but do your best. The only thing to note is that when you do this, you have to work with your business office and your accounting staff to make sure that these expenses are course coded correctly in UFARs. And if you're doing it this year for fiscal year 21 funds, that course code is 001. So this slide just has, some of you have been curious about the course codes now that we're in a new decade, but we start over. So with this year that ends in a 1, we start over with the 001 code. And then a year from now, you will use 002 and 003, and then and then I want to speak to the group of consortia that are listed on this slide that submitted their narratives in June of this year. So we had a bunch of other folks, some of whom are also on this call, who spent a lot of time and effort in June reviewing those narratives, and then we got together and we did a synchronous online narrative review workshop and meeting this year, which worked out great. And thank you to all of you who did the reviewing and participated in that event. For those of you in this group of consortia who submitted your narratives, I will be reaching out to you soon. The next step is we will talk about the possibility of either an in-person site visit or a virtual meeting to go over the review results. That will happen sometime this fall. And I will be reaching out to you all to schedule that soon. And then kind of a final reminder from me that coming up in 2022, we will have for all currently funded ABE consortia, the federal competitive application. So that means that in 2022, we take a pause on 5-year narratives, and then we will start the regular 5-year narrative cycle again in 2023. So I'm gonna pause here for a second. Are there any questions in the chat or anything that we need to address before we move on?
Hi, Jody, this is Julie. Yep. And we did receive a question about federal funding, and it was regarding, let's see, I perceived it as the additional federal funding that we received. I think, Teresa, it says state funding is up slightly, was wondering about federal funding as well. Yes. Federal funding did go up, but not by much at all.
Yes, that's my understanding as well. I think probably maybe they went up by similar amounts, not enough to really make a big difference for us, but better than going down. So yep, federal funding also up a little bit.
Yep. And I think that's all I see in the chat right now.
Great. Okay, then I'm going to hand it off to Astrid.
Hey, thanks, Jody. Let's go to the next slide. So we have a couple of different accountability updates for you. First is just a reminder that your August report submissions are due next week. They're due on Monday by 3:30 p.m. Those should be emailed to Brad. For more detailed information and guidance, you can go back to the email that was sent out on June 21st. With both the form that you need to fill out as well as a more detailed guidance about the required components of that report. Go to the next slide. We also want to let the field know that we are looking ahead now that more and more programs are opening up and offering a certain level of in-person programming. We are planning to end the COVID exemptions that have been in place for the past year. So the exemptions on NRS assessments for new students, as well as the exemption for training for new volunteers, are going to be ending as of October 1st. So let's look at some of the details here on the next slide. So looking ahead to after this exemption ends, we want to really encourage you to start thinking now about how you may get your students tested. Don't wait until October. We encourage you to either test in person or, as I'll talk about in a couple of slides, start thinking about how you can use your computer-based testing administrations to test your students remotely. So starting on October 1st, you will not be able to enter the COVID test exemption for any new students starting after that date. For your current students that have that COVID test exemption, we are asking that you test them with an approved NRS test to get an official NRS pretest level as soon as possible. And just a reminder that the COVID test exemption is not an official test. So as soon as you are able to test those students, they can receive an NRS test, no matter how many contact hours they have, because that is considered a pretest. Looking ahead, you'll have the rest of this year to get your students tested, but contact hours for any students that have hours past that October 1st date and later, and do not have an NRS approved pretest by April 30th of next year will not be eligible for federal ABE funding. So we really hope that with the return to more in-person programming through computer-based testing, you will be able to, over time, find ways to get your students tested. We are still under federal requirements to be testing our students and to achieve the level gains and reaching the targets. So we are interested in ramping back up. We know that this may be a challenge, and so we're committed to working with you to find creative solutions to testing, and we'll be working with the SPARC, the Support Professionals Advisory Committee, as well as continuing to talk about this in future manager meetings to identify strategies for testing. Anything the rest of the team would like to add about the COVID testing exemption?
There,
Let's go.
Astrid, there is one question in here from Scott. Do we have different codes? Oh, this is regarding the money. For the new money, if so, we can begin spending it in 26 days ago. What are the new codes? I do believe
is this referring to the additional ABE funding, Scott?
Yes, the 10 million. And Teresa responded with finance code 166.
Yes, there is a different code. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but I believe that Teresa is probably right. Yeah, Scott, if you shoot an email, I can confirm it for you. But yes, there is a different code.
And then I see Eric has.
Yes.
Go ahead. Was there more questions about the code?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
This was
so
regarding
Eric has a question. Will hours October and later be eligible for state ABE funding if a student isn't tested by April 30th, 2022? Yes, that they will be eligible for state funding. However, looking ahead, most likely starting May 1st of next year, we will no longer be able to enter hours for students who do not have a valid NRS pretest. And then Teresa's just clarifying that the FIN code for those additional funds was in the email from Brad regarding the funding. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, and Jenny is just adding regarding Eric's question. So Jenny, do you want to chime in?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that I think Eric's question, I just want to make sure it was clear that hours from October and beyond, we Okay, so you won't be able to put in a COVID test. So you will need to give your brand new students at that point an NRS test. That's correct, right? MDE team?
Yes, but if you
Even
have
for-
a continuing student.
Even for state funding. But for,
Yes.
yeah, for the continuing students who had a COVID test on their record, if they continue after October 1st, those will continue to get state funding because that COVID test is giving them a level, but not federal funding if they continue after October 1st. So it is a little confusing. So if a new online student starts in October, this is Eric's question, or later, will they have to have a test to get state funding for 12 or more hours? That is my understanding.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
Yes.
Because once October 1st hits and you can no longer enter a COVID test, SID will begin to block hours beyond 12 hours. And you can no longer take, I mean, you won't be able to take attendance after 12 hours unless they have a test. And since you can't put in a COVID test anymore, you're going to have to put in an NRS test. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right. So I think if you have a student who starts after October 1st, you would only be able to get 12 hours worth of funding unless and until there's an NRS test entered.
Yes. So at that point, it kind of goes back to normal as far as needing a test in order to add more than 12 hours. And at that point, the only tests allowable will be the NRS tests. So you can, so even to get state funding to show up on your table A, you're going to have an NRS test after October 1st for new students. Ongoing students will already have the COVID test on their record because that was allowed at the time. You'll still be able to give them attendance, but the state will want an NRS test to give you the full federal funding for those students for the whole year, but the state funding will be allowed based on the COVID test that you were given, that you gave to them prior to October 1st. So it's going to be a little tricky.
Thanks for helping to
Does that
clarify, Jenny.
Yeah, when we were talking about earlier, we were focused so much on federal funding that the state piece
Yes.
needs to be explicit as well.
Any other questions or clarifications that people have?
I'm wondering if
we anticipate that there will be more as you think through the
the and we'll be
details.
making reports and stuff in SID to make it easier for you to spot students who fit into certain categories. At this point, everyone is still in the same category, which is that you can still be giving the COVID test. But the more students you start giving your NRS test to now, the less you'll have to worry about figuring out who you need to quickly test in October to get on board. And I'm wondering if folks, if you don't mind, if people could chime in with how difficult they envision testing being even by October. I know it's hard to know right now with everything, so getting a little more unknown with the variants and stuff, but do people have a plan in place to start NRS testing more students already? You could chime in.
Yeah, that would be great if people have a sense, if you could chime in the chat. We'll keep moving forward, but to have a record of what your plans are in the chat, and we can come back to this during the Q&A period at the end. As I mentioned, we also will be having the sunset of a COVID exemption for new volunteers receiving training as of October 1st. So volunteers that came on board this past year were exempt from the training requirements. The newly revised adult education volunteer training policy will go into effect on October 1st. So look for more information about that policy at Summer Institute, and we'll be sending it out in email in August as well, with some more information about some exciting new training options and delivery methods through Literacy Minnesota, and some tweaks to the volunteer training policy. Go to the next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we do still have computer-based test administrations that were purchased at the state level to support computer-based testing in programs. We're looking toward a second distribution of the remaining administrations. We're going to be sending out an email with more information and a Google form for consortium fiscal agents to fill out. You'll use that to request the number of test administrations you'd like to receive. All consortia are eligible to receive these tests. So even if you opted out during the first distribution round, you can opt in for this round and receive tests. And just a note that the test publisher's requirements need to still be met in order to accept those test administrations. So you'll need to adhere to their training requirements as well as the local setup requirements associated with those tests. So keep an eye out at Summer Institute in your email for more information on how to request those second set of tests.
Astrid, we have one question regarding the volunteer training. And
Yes.
it is, do
Okay, I found it here.
do you know if the volunteer training will also be offered online or only in person for pre-service?
So the folks over at Literacy Minnesota are working on a variety of options for people to get their initial training as volunteers. So there will be the option to participate in person, online via webinar, or online asynchronously. So there'll be a variety of options for volunteers to choose from depending on what fits best with their schedules and with their volunteer assignment.
Okay, and then Nadine chimed in that Rochester is doing in-person that's testing, sorry. So I have another question that came in regarding, and this one might be more for Jody, regarding the federal recompete. And I know later on in the presentation, we'll get to dates, but this was more around the questions that might be asked and if there's a timeline for when some of that might be available to the field.
Yeah, good question. So keep in mind that part of the reason, actually the reason why we have to do this competition is because our state receives federal WIOA funding as part of the federal adult education system. So from that perspective, this is truly a competition. It is, it's open to any eligible provider. So what that means is at our level at MDE, we can't really give any advantage to current providers by saying anything much about the application until the application is released. We will do that in the fall at some point, fall, winter. And we do on an upcoming slide, we have dates for you to set aside, or a date for you to set aside for a technical assistance session where we will gather everyone and talk through the application and the questions and the requirements in detail. But just know, because I know some of you are already thinking about it, and I know you'd like to, get some thoughts and ideas about what might be asked and what you should be preparing for. And we totally recognize that that is a reasonable thing for you to be doing, but from our end, we have to be a little bit careful about doing that process in the correct ways. So I appreciate the question, and that is the bureaucratic answer.
Thank you.
Okay, I am not seeing any other questions. Just thanks to everybody for chiming in about what's happening around testing in your programs. That will be helpful for us as we think about how to support you in getting your students tested. So we're going to turn things over to Julie here for some transitions updates.
Okay, thank you, Astrid. Some of you may be aware that in 2015, the Minnesota legislature enacted a law. They're trying to target or increase the number of Minnesota adults aged 25 to 44 who will get a post-secondary certificate or degree by 2025. And this had to do with research that was done showing that we are in need of having more individuals across the state who have training in various areas. And so that's a goal that was set in 2015. And then if you could move to the next slide. You might be asking, well, why does it matter? And what I put in this slide is the living wage estimates for one adult in Minnesota. And the ability of Minnesota workers to live and raise their families in this state really relies on their ability to find employment at a family sustaining wage that will help them cover food, childcare, transportation, and housing. And so if you move to the next slide, that's what an initiative they started called Forward Together is all about. The Office of Higher Education, along with the Department of Education, Adult Basic Education, the Department of Labor, and several other agencies are working together to try to get, friends, neighbors, other people that you may know of involved or interested in getting some sort of post-secondary degree. And this, again, can be any type of credential. It can be in an apprenticeship. It can be in a certification. But they're looking for people to volunteer. And there is a sign up. I think that's yep, it's in the link now. And we're trying to do outreach beginning this summer, and we're working with the Graduate Network to recruit and train local volunteers who will kind of serve as ambassadors to trying to get people to enroll or return to college or workforce training. If you're interested, you can sign up here. If you have any neighbors, friends, coworkers, colleagues that would be interested in this as well, this is a great place to start. It's not a huge commitment. It really is just a conversation on how do we help some Minnesotans get some sort of training or credential in order to get jobs that will help sustain their families. So I wanted to make you aware of that opportunity. And then also this is for Minnesota State only, not for all higher education institutions, but for Minnesota State, they have decided to keep the guided self-placement guidance in place for campuses that have weighed in and say, we want to continue to participate in this. How does this help adult basic education learners? What it means is they can accept students without standardized test scores or a high school GPA for placement. They don't have to take the AccuPlacer anymore during this time period if they are involved, if the campus is involved in this pilot. The reason they're doing this is because they had a lot of feedback from the college presidents who wanted to continue this guided self-placement over some concerns they had about inequities resulting from the use of standardized placement tests. This pilot is going to go until September of 2023. And that's so that more data, can be gathered to evaluate the effectiveness. So if you are working with learners that you are trying to help enroll in Minnesota State, this is really a great opportunity. It helps people who might have anxiety around taking standardized tests do not necessarily have to take those standardized tests. The AccuPlacer is not mandated for if they're using this guided self-placement. So please talk to your college and find out what their guided self-placement process is, and help learners transition through that process to enroll in Minnesota State. Next slide, please. Pathways to Prosperity grants. So this is the grant offered through DEED that has a requirement for adult basic education to be one of the partners. They received or were appropriated 7 million for state fiscal year 22 and another 7 million, I think, for state fiscal year 23. And so there's a lot of funding available. It's designed for adult basic education learners. There's different models you can use. So I'm really trying to promote this and have ABE programs look at it and apply for some of this funding. It'll be a great opportunity, I believe. Next slide. So in relation to the Pathways to Prosperity grants, DEED also offers several other grants that adult basic education can apply for, but is not necessarily involved in a required partner like Pathways for Prosperity. So that could be the youth program, Southeast Asian grant, and others similar to that. And DEED is trying to change their process for reviewing these grants. And what you see here is a quote from the Deputy Commissioner at DEED, and it's saying we're committed to including more voices and perspectives in our grant making process. So they asked adult basic education to reach out to ABE managers, teachers, support staff, some learners, if you think they have the ability to do this as well, to review grants, coworkers and colleagues, and they want people to review these grants from the community, people who understand or are actually from a lot of the communities that these grants are going to be serving. So you'll read approximately 10 to 12 proposals. It's 20 to 40 hours, depending on how many proposals they get. Expected review is 30-day time period between August and October 2021. And there is a small stipend available. I think it's approximately around $100 so that people will receive a small thank you for doing this. Keep in mind though, that if you work for a state agency, they cannot give you that. And most of you, I believe, do not work for state agencies. So that's something to consider. Again, this is around equity and making sure we're including everyone's voices in reviewing these grants, and that they are not reviewed by only people who work at state agencies. Any questions about any of the transitions work?
Not seeing anything in the chat, Julie.
Okay, all right. If not, we can move on to the high C's, Minnesota High School Equivalency Assessments. So we have some good news. The GED was approved and awarded a contract. Additional contract negotiation is occurring with a second test vendor. There will be a formation of a new high C's advisory group after all the results are announced. And I believe Sherry had a question regarding this in our, did the slide go back? Was there a question? Here, Sherry had a question about this one, high C subsidy available soon. So the GED has been approved and we're getting the new legislative subsidy set up. It's only going to be $10 off per GED test, a maximum of $40 discount per tester. We can't, sorry, Jill, I'm seeing your question. Unfortunately, we can't say who that is until the contract has officially been signed. And it's actually the office, I believe, Minnesota Management and Budget that is running this competition. So until they announce it, we can't mention who it is. All right, next slide. These are the number of tests that were administered last year. About 3,000 were online proctored. And according to Brad, that's down from the previous year, which isn't surprising with COVID. There is a redesign approach, and I am not going to talk about this. This is really, I think Brad's more familiar with this. However, there will be a link to an entire PowerPoint presentation that was sent to us from GED testing that would provide more information on this. And we can put that file in the chat for everyone to look at. So unused vouchers recently expired or are about to expire. The average turnaround time is 1 to 4 weeks. It's easier to extend them than to replace them. And vouchers can be used while extensions request is being processed. Requests are handled on a first come, first serve basis. And it looks like Astrid has put that slideshow in there. Thank you, Astrid, that's helpful. That's going to give you more information. They're also asking you to nominate your student for GED Graduate of the Month. So each year each month they're selecting a GE graduate with an inspiring story or journey. And the winners will receive an iPad and are featured in their social media channels. And there's a link there that if you want to do that, you can submit that information to GED Testing Service. There will be changes to the online Proctored GED coming September 1st. The price is going to increase to $6 or an additional $6, sorry. And if people register in advance, if you go to the next slide, the 40th, here's more information about it. But basically, if they register in advance and it passes that deadline, they're going to be paying the $6 increase anyways. Next slide. Oh, what is the current online price? I don't know that information, and does anyone else know?
Yeah, I don't know either, but I bet somebody listening does.
It's
Yeah.
Melissa with GED. So the current price is the same as the CBT price, $30.
Oh, Melissa, are you here? Are you on?
Yes, I could cover these slides if you want.
That would be terrific if that's all right. I don't, yeah.
I tried to unmute earlier to say that I was willing to do it, but it wasn't working. So I'm glad that you can hear me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Brad is not available. So if you could say more about
Yes.
what the current price is and what the increase is?
Yes. If you could please go back to the previous slides, because I could give more information on the vouchers, which is I know is key to a lot of the educators.
The voucher slide, unused vouchers, that one?
Yes, if you go back this one.
Okay, there. Yep.
So take a look at the vouchers when they expire. It is much easier to renew them if you reach out before they expire, and hopefully you can give them to us, reach out to me a few weeks before they expire. But it takes much longer if they've already expired, because brand new vouchers need to be created, brand new numbers need to be assigned to them. So take a look, reach out to me if you have any questions. I don't actually take care of that, but I reach out to another team, and then I keep track and just ping them if I haven't heard every so often. Like I just, okay, can you give me an update? And then I provide the educator with the update as well. And I know many of you have reached out to Brad and I in the past year and a half. So just please continue to do that, and I will work on your behalf to get them taken care of for you. Next slide. So the grad of the month, I know that all of you work with amazing students, and it would be great, to get some of the Minnesota students winning this award, where it is an iPad, it is $1,000 towards additional education. Now, the thing is, though, we need to make sure that not everybody that's going to submit or nominate a graduate is doing it this month or next month. So just try and, stagger it, and you can work with the graduate on the form, or they can do it, themselves. One of the questions they are asked is, did you work with the prep center, and to indicate who your teacher is. So we can give a shout out to the prep center and the teacher, but I would encourage you to just kind of be thinking of that in the background. And when you think that, this person has gone through just extraordinary circumstances, they really do deserve this. And I know so many of the students do, that you encourage them to submit this, because really it's the students themselves that need to make the submission, not so much the educator. And it's pretty short, the form. It's not lengthy or anything like that. And then we feature them in our monthly electronic newsletter called the In Session. Next slide. So yes, we are moving from pilot to post-pilot when it comes to OP. In the state of Minnesota, by far the majority of the tests that are taken at a computer-based test center. But there still is a need, a want for the option to take the tests from the comfort, of your own home. So that's why, to move forward with this, there have definitely been some improvements, some changes. Post-pilot will take place on September 1st. That means that the price will increase by $6 since we introduced it last May of 2020 to now. It's been the exact same price as the computer-based test, $30. Next slide. And so what's really important to understand here is that if you know that you have students who want to take the test on OP after September 1st, encourage them to get into the system and schedule their test before September 1st. So just getting into the system to schedule it, even if it's a date later, so that they are paying $30 that the test costs right now. If they wait until September 1st, then they're going to see that $6 increase. And just know, a lot of questions have come in about vouchers, that if you've already purchased vouchers, that those will continue to be valid for use with the OP test through December 1st of 2021. And that those vouchers are going to cover 100% of the cost for the OP test or in-person testing if it's used before December 1st. Also, those testers who have, in order to take the OP test, you need to score green on the GED Ready test before you're allowed to schedule the OP exam. So that will continue. At first, when we introduced it, the stipulation was that you had to schedule your operational test, your actual test, within 60 days of scoring green on the GED Ready. That is not the case right now. You could schedule it at this point any date that they choose. It doesn't have to be within 60 days. I do know that we're finalizing some of the details for OP post-pilot. I would encourage you, if you're attending Summer Institute, to attend the OP session that we're going to have. My colleague, Chris, who is the expert on OP is really the team lead for this project, is going to be running a presentation where she talks about the updates that have been made, the changes going forward, and we'll walk you through what the new experience is like, the updated experience. So if you're going to be attending a summer institute, I would encourage you to watch that, and she definitely has most of the information. Next slide. So how will the students find out about the online proctored test and the increase in the price? Well, we've already messaged them in their accounts. It's on the GED website. They've also received an email notifying them of this last week or the week before. I think it was July 15th. We sent an email out to educators to let them know. So there isn't some information posted about what's coming, but there will be additional information that will be sent to all educators that are on our mailing list soon with those updates. And the other thing that I wanted to let you know is that there's also a banner message in the student's account where when they log in, across the top of the screen, it's letting them know that, you know, hey, like if you are interested in the OP test, the price is going up starting September 1st. Next slide. Okay, so I know
Melissa, this is Julie. We do have a few questions. At one time, the state collected a list of which testing centers are opened at this time and the hours. Is that available? And if so, can you share that with us?
So I know I gave Grad a list. I think that was the most recent list was about 2 months ago. So I will work on getting an updated list for Brad so he can.
Okay, and then there's another question. Thank you. Are they charged an additional $6 to take the GED ready? Or is that what the additional $6 for the online version is for?
There's no change in the cost of the GED ready. So the GED ready, you know, has been $6 since we introduced it. When there's promotions, sometimes it's, you know, 50% off, and we've had other discounts related to that. But the $6 increase is related to anybody taking the operational GED test via OP.
Okay, thank you. And then did you say that there is not a 60-day time limit on the green GED ready tests to take it online proctored?
That is correct. When we first introduced it, when we were in that pilot phase last May, that was one of the rules that you, in order to take the OP test, you had to score green on the official practice test and then take it within 60 days. That is not the case right now, but I do know that that's one of the details that is being worked out for post-pilot. Should there be some sort of time limit set on that, like say 180 days, or just leave it open? So in the next communication that's sent to educators, I'm pretty sure that would be one of the items that would be listed there.
Okay, thank you. Then one more question is, so would they be charged $42 for each online test, 30 plus 6 plus 6?
No, just 36.
Just 36. All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I don't know how much time you have on your end, but I do have a couple other GED updates, so I'm not sure if there's time for me to provide that, or if I should just wait until the next meeting.
Melissa, we did, and I can share it again. We did share the full slide deck that you shared with Brad.
Okay.
So I'll put that in the chat again, and then if you're available to stick around to answer questions, we can do that, but I think we do need to move on.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Melissa.
Yeah,
We appreciate
thank
you stepping in.
It's okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. And so I just put the the full slide deck in the chat as well. So people can take a look at that and can come back to additional questions at the end. So we have a few professional development announcements and reminders for you. Just a reminder that Summer Institute is coming up in just a few weeks. It's going to be held on August 18th and 19th, virtual again this year. A couple of deadlines to keep in mind. There is still time to submit a virtual poster session proposal. You need to send those in by August 5th. And this is the virtual poster session is a recording. It's a great way to share something that's working well in your program. So encourage you and your staff to submit one. And then the registration deadline is August 11th. So encourage you to get in there and register. And if one of my colleagues can pop those links in the chat, that would be great. Thank you, Julie.
Yep. Just one question. Do you know if it can only be paid via credit card at this time?
Let's see. Yes, that is correct. Tracy is confirming. That
Okay.
it can only be paid via credit card.
Okay, thank you.
And Jill, I would encourage you to contact Literacy Action Network with any registration questions. And I can put that in the chat. Contact Carla and she can help you problem solve that. Looking ahead to the fall and the winter, we've got a number of events that are already on the books and encourage you to save the date. Our annual ABE Math Institute is coming up on September 24th. That will be a virtual event again this year. We did some surveying of our North and South managers and have made the decision based on those survey results to hold our Fall North Regional in person in October 14th and 15th. That will be held in Walker. And then for those who prefer a virtual option, we'll be holding a statewide virtual regional conference on November 5th. Looking ahead to the spring, our intention is to hold the Spring South Regional in person. Right now, that's tentatively scheduled for May 6th in Mankato. Let us know if you know of any conflicts with that date. And then we'll be also scheduling a statewide virtual event for the spring as well. So trying to balance the preferences and needs for in-person and virtual for the regional events. The Support Services Conference is coming up. If you go back, November 18th and 19th, that will be a virtual event, as will the Volunteer Management Conference on December 3rd. And then looking ahead to January, the Language and Literacy Institute is currently scheduled to be in person on January 27th and 28th. So lots of great PD coming your way in the fall and winter. Go to the next slide. Jody mentioned this earlier. We have set some dates for manager focused events this fall. So we will be holding a virtual fall manager meeting on Tuesday, November 16th in the morning, 9:30 to 12:30. And then we will be holding the Federal ABE competition workshop in December. So Wednesday, December 8th from 9:30 to 11:30. That will also be virtual. So save the date for both of those and we'll be sending out registration information in the coming months. Finally, want to just share some reminders about the teacher verification model and make sure that everyone knows where to find the information they need about that new process. There is a page on the Literacy Minnesota website specifically dedicated to the teacher verification model, and Julie has posted that link in the chat. So you can go there to get a summary of the certification process and frequently asked questions. We do have a couple of upcoming certification webinars scheduled. One will be held on August 17th, from 2 to 4. And then another one is scheduled for September 29th from 2 to 4. So if you have staff who are interested in getting TVM certified, they need to go into the Distance and Blended Learning Basics for Minnesota Adult Education online course. That course is required. And they will see in the TVM module the information about registering for the TVM certification webinar, which comes after they have completed the course. Any questions about TVM or any other DL related topic? Encourage you to contact the MN ABE Distance Learning Desk support email, and I'll pop that in the chat as well. Let's see, I see a couple of questions coming in. Scott, for questions about TVM certification and teachers who have been working toward it, you should contact that email that I just mentioned, and I will put that in the chat. That goes to the number of people on the distance learning team, and they can answer your questions. Lydia asked, do notes need to be submitted for the distance and learning basics course? Yes, in order to get CEUs, you do need to submit notes for modules 1 through 4. Am I capturing all the questions, Julie? Was there anything else?
I think you got all of them. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to pause here for any questions about any of the content. Looks like Brad has arrived. Good to have you here, Brad. So this would be an opportunity if there were any questions that we weren't able to answer about GED. Maybe this one.
Yeah.
Sherry says, I believe you said that the code for GED testing subsidy of $10 per test was coming soon. Any idea of a timeline? I have students who are waiting to test and need to know.
Great question, Sherry. Right now, we're still, we are in negotiations with GED Testing Service and Pearson VUE about getting the MN GED 10 code set up. And so so we're working with them to make sure that all the billing is squared away. We've completed all the paperwork on our end. So we're hoping within a week that'll be up and running. But again, that's our goal right now. So stay tuned, and we will email everyone once we have that code up and running.
Thanks, Brad. Any other questions about any of the topics covered today or anything else that's on your minds? And then we're going to move into some breakout discussions. Okay, I'm not seeing anything else, so let's go to the next slide. So we know that this is a time of transition and change, and lots of planning has been happening all around the state as you look forward to fall and make decisions about what programming models you're going to offer. From the chat that came in at the beginning of the webinar, it sounds like many of you are planning on offering multiple options to your students. So we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk with your peers to find out what others are planning, what models are being implemented, and what challenges you're facing, and any lessons learned or resources that you've found to be helpful as you're making these decisions. We're going to go into breakout groups for about 15 minutes. And then we'll come back to share any ahas or other questions that have come up in your groups. Susan, are we ready to move into the breakouts?
I have them set up, but unfortunately, a bunch of people are just leaving the meeting because they can't stay. And so now the group rosters suddenly became very unbalanced. So
Okay.
to recreate them. So give me just a sec.
Okay. Thanks, Susan.
All right, that looks better. We don't have any rooms with 1 or 2 people in them anymore.
Okay. That will be a better discussion.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, so let's get started. If we do have any really small groups as people are transitioning, we'll try to move you around. Welcome back, everyone. We hope that you found those conversations to be useful. we are going to move forward and formally close out the webinar here with our final slides, but then we are happy to stick around to answer any questions that came up in your small groups or discuss any of the ideas that were shared. So we want to remind you that there is a tool available to help you continue the conversations that you started in your small groups. We have our new Minnesota Adult Education Network through Mighty Networks, and I'm putting information in the chat about how to get signed up. This is our new networking platform and a way for you to connect with others around the state. A good opportunity to share more about your programming models and plans for the fall. So let's go to the next slide, Jody. Just a reminder that the recording and the slides will be posted on the Literacy Action Network by the end of the day tomorrow. If you have colleagues who missed this or you want to go back and watch it again. Our next web chat will be in September 22nd from 1 to 2:30. I want to thank everybody for coming today. It's good to hear from you all. Look forward to connecting with many of you at Summer Institute and in the many events coming up this fall. I will also put in the chat the PDF again of the slides for this session, and you can also access them later on the Literacy Action Network slide. Thank you so much to Susan Wettenkamp-Brandt for hosting our webinar today. And we're happy to again stick around to answer any questions that you have about any of the topics from today's webinar or from your small group discussions.